Have you ever wondered how a German shepherd, left on an icy road by the only person he trusted, finds the strength to keep hoping for a rescue that may never come? Could heartbreak transform into a path to healing for both the forsaken dog and the strangers who find him? In a world where second chances feel scarce, how far would compassion go to bridge the gap between despair and redemption? This is a story that answers it all. Subscribe to our channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more inspiring rescues like this one to light, truly proving that hope and kindness can change countless lives. Bruno didn't realize he was about to be abandoned. From a back seat of a dark sedan, his breath fogged the window as he watched snow swirl beneath flickering streetlights. Outside, the early morning silence weighed on everything, as though the city itself was bracing for something terrible. The man at the wheel gripped the steering wheel tightly, jaw set, avoiding even a glance at the German shepherd he'd once claimed to love. The sedan slowed near a deserted curb, engine idling with a low rumble. Bruno's ears twitched, anticipating a routine stop. Instead, the man reached over and unlatched the back door, his face devoid of kindness. "Go on," he muttered, voice tight with guilt or anger. Bruno couldn't tell. Eager to please, the shepherd hopped out, expecting a command. Yet no command came. The door slammed. Without warning, the sedan accelerated. Confused, Bruno trotted forward, his nails scraping icy pavement. In seconds, he broke into a desperate run. His breath puffed in frantic bursts as he tried to chase the receding taillights. Each step felt more uncertain. The road was slippery, and the car kept gaining distance. Bruno barked once, then again, the wind stealing his voice. The man never looked back. Within moments, the car vanished around a corner. Bruno skidded to a stop. Heart pounding, he spun in circles, inhaling cold air that stung his lungs. The place felt utterly foreign. No familiar scents, no warm house to return to. Snow gathered on his paws, and a bitter wind gnawed at his fur. Still, he stood there, tail lowered, ears angled toward the empty road as though his owner might reappear any second. Minutes passed, then an hour. Darkness pressed in. Bruno's legs trembled from the cold, yet he refused to move far from a spot. Every rumble of an engine made him perk up, only to sag again when it wasn't that same sedan. His breath formed small clouds in the air. The city slept, its lights flickering in silent indifference. Hunger gnawed at his belly. He remembered the routine that morning, his bowl filled with kibble. That comforting routine snatched away hours ago. He took a few tentative steps, scanning the dim alleys for anything recognizable. A single flickering neon sign cast faint light on slushy sidewalks, but offered no warmth. Each time Bruno heard a car, hope flared within him, only to fade when it passed without slowing. Eventually, exhaustion forced him to wander. He found no open doors, no gentle voices calling him inside. Snow piled against doorways. Windows remained dark. He tried curling up beneath an overhang near a shuttered shop, but the chill bit through his thick coat. His paws ached stiff from ice. The night dragged on like a punishment he didn't understand. Somewhere in the distance, a stray dog barked. Bruno lifted his head, ears high with fleeting optimism. But the bark faded, leaving only the hush of snowfall. With each step, the unrelenting cold seeped deeper into his muscles. Still, a shred of loyalty urged him to watch for that familiar car. Perhaps it was all a mistake, and his owner would circle back, open the door, and whisk him home. Another car rumbled by, headlights sweeping over Bruno's crouched form. He blinked in the sudden glare, tail thumping hopefully against the ground. But the vehicle never stopped. The glare faded, returning him to darkness. Reality set in. His owner wasn't returning. The betrayal left a hollow ache that overshadowed even the burning cold. Weary, Bruno finally collapsed near a silent intersection. He tried so hard to remain vigilant, but his body was giving out. His ears drooped, eyes half-lidded, each breath ragged. The hush of falling snow lulled him toward a lonely sleep. And yet, faint and distant, footsteps approached. Voices. A flashlight beam skimmed across the frost-laden pavement, illuminating his trembling figure. Before he could process it, gentle hands reached out. This time, they didn't shut the door and drive away. They lifted him up, offering warmth he barely dared to believe in. Bruno drifted in and out of consciousness as he was carried into a sheltering vehicle. The heat vents blew warm air across his frozen fur, jarring his sense of reality. Could this truly be happening? After what felt like hours lost in the cold, the abrupt shift was overwhelming. A woman's voice, soft and urgent, filtered through his fog. "We need to hurry," she said. "He's on the brink of hypothermia." Another voice responded, "He's half-starved too. Let's get him something warm to eat." Bruno's ears twitched. The promise of food and safety thawed his numb spirit just enough to keep him awake. He tried to lift his head, but his muscles quivered with fatigue. The woman reached over and stroked his head gently. "Easy, boy," she murmured. "You're safe now." The ride ended at a modest animal shelter, its exterior lights glowing against the snowy darkness. The woman, her name was Hannah, cradled Bruno in her arms, determined not to let him touch the ice again. Inside, a rush of warm air enveloped them. A few volunteers hovered, quickly clearing space on a low exam table. Bruno felt the press of gentle hands, a stethoscope against his chest, a thermometer placed carefully. It was all so foreign to him, yet calmer than being alone in the night. "Body temperature's low," someone announced, draping blankets around him. "Heart rate's elevated. He's clearly been under severe stress." Hannah nodded, concern etched into her features. "Let's get some fluids in him." They offered a bowl with soft, warm food. Bruno hesitated. He'd once learned to wait for his owner's signal to eat, but that memory cut like a knife. His owner was gone, and these strangers were trying to help. Tentatively, he lapped at the food, each bite renewing a faint flicker of hope. As the exam continued, they discovered no microchip, just a faded collar with no tag. Hannah frowned. "No ID," she murmured, her brow creasing. "We'll scan again, but it seems like someone removed any trace." Another volunteer gently sponged melted snow from Bruno's fur, revealing patches of dryness and early signs of frostbite on his paw pads. Bruno winced at the sting, but a kind hand stabilized him. Minutes stretched into an hour as they monitored him. The hush of the shelter corridors wrapped around them, punctuated by occasional barks from other dogs behind closed doors. During that time, Hannah rubbed Bruno's ears softly. "We'll figure out where you came from," she whispered. "And I promise we won't leave you out there again." Bruno closed his eyes at her tone. Could trust ever be rebuilt? Eventually, they settled him into a clean kennel with thick blankets. Warmth seeped into his bones, and the weight of exhaustion pressed down. Despite the kindness around him, a coil of anxiety remained in his gut. He'd had comfort before, and it ended in betrayal. Would this truly be different? The shelter staff retreated, letting him rest. Outside his kennel, Hannah conferred with a colleague. "He's in shock, physically and mentally," she said. "We'll keep him under observation. Who knows how long he was out there?" The colleague sighed. "Poor boy. Some people just dump their dogs as if they're disposable." Hannah's gaze darkened. "Not on my watch. I won't let that happen again." Bruno dozed off, lulled by the quiet hum of a heater and distant, soft chatter. Dreams swirled. Memories of a once warm house, a once familiar routine that ended on an icy street. He jolted awake, momentarily disoriented, but then relaxed at the sight of Hannah standing by the kennel door, checking on him. Her presence was gentle, unwavering. She crouched, speaking softly. "We don't know your name," she said, voice tinged with sympathy. "But we'll figure everything out." Bruno blinked, uncertain. He no longer knew what tomorrow would bring. But Hannah's assurance kindled a fragile spark of faith that maybe, just maybe, his life wasn't over. As the night crept toward dawn, he closed his eyes again, drifting into a light sleep where warmth battled the lingering chill of abandonment, and a single question lingered in his resting mind. Could he dare to belong anywhere again. When morning light filtered through the shelter windows, Bruno stirred awake. Faint echoes of barking reached his kennel, a reminder that he wasn't alone. He lifted his head, inhaling sterile air tinged with disinfectant. Though the memory of the icy street haunted him, the kennel's warmth offered a semblance of comfort. Hannah greeted him with a bowl of soft food, her smile gentle. "Morning, big guy," she said. Bruno sniffed the meal, hesitant as ever. He glanced up at her, seeking permission. She nodded. "Go ahead." Slowly, he lowered his muzzle, hunger finally overpowering doubt. Every bite revitalized him, each swallow a small victory. A short while later, a second volunteer arrived with a scanner. Hannah guided it across Bruno's back and neck, repeating the process carefully. She sighed. Still no microchip. The volunteer frowned. That means either it was removed or never inserted. Hannah shook her head. "Either way, it's suspicious. We'll do some digging in local records." Bruno watched them, ears perked. He sensed their frustration, but he didn't understand the words. Throughout the day, strangers wandered the shelter. Some paused at Bruno's kennel, offering fleeting pity or admiration. Yet when they learned he was a larger adult dog, many moved on to see younger pups. Bruno observed with muted acceptance. He'd once wagged his tail at every new face, but that was before the betrayal. This time he remained calm, waiting for the slightest sign of genuine intention. In the late afternoon, Hannah returned with new information. "I asked around," she told a fellow staff member, voice low. "Somebody spotted a dark sedan matching a description on the same street Bruno was found. Possibly the owner or whoever dumped him." Her colleague's eyes hardened. "If we find that person," Hannah nodded. "I know, but let's focus on Bruno first." Hannah's tone softened as she approached Bruno's kennel. "Mind if I come in?" she asked with a gentle smile. Bruno blinked, shifting slightly to give her room. She entered slowly, kneeling to meet his gaze. "I wish you could tell me your story," she murmured, resting a palm lightly on his shoulder. "But I'll figure it out one piece at a time." Bruno lowered his head, exhaling a quiet sigh. Her kindness made him uneasy. Kindness always preceded heartbreak in his limited experience. She pulled out a leash, bright blue and brand new. "Let's take a walk," she suggested. Bruno eyed it warily, but allowed her to slip it around his neck. The last time he wore a leash, it ended with screeching tires and cold pavement. Yet Hannah's hands were gentle, her voice encouraging. Outside, the winter air nipped at them, though the sun offered a mild reprieve from the freezing temperatures of the previous night. The shelter had a small enclosed yard, fenced off to let dogs stretch their legs. Snow crunched under Bruno's paws as they strolled, each step slow and deliberate. Despite the fence, he cast glances at the horizon, half expecting the dark sedan to appear, or his former owner's voice to call. Neither happened. During their circuit of the yard, Hannah paused, kneeling again. "If you want to run, you can," she said, unclipping the leash. Bruno hesitated. His instincts suggested caution, but the open space tempted him. With one tentative step, he moved forward. Then, as if testing his own freedom, he broke into a slow trot. Hannah stood back, a gentle smile playing on her lips. He made a few laps around the enclosure, stirring up small clouds of powdery snow. It wasn't pure joy. He was still weighed down by confusion, but felt good to move without fear. Returning to Hannah, he lowered his head, a quiet acceptance forming in his posture. She offered a treat, and this time he ate without reservation. As dusk neared, they headed back inside. Bruno felt a subtle shift in his chest, less dread, more curiosity. Hannah's unwavering presence acted like a balm, soothing the raw edges of mistrust. Though he remained haunted by the memory of that silent departure in the cold, day by day, he sensed that maybe, in this shelter's glow, he could find a sliver of belonging. And for the first time, hope flickered that his story might not end the way it began. Word of Bruno's plight spread among the shelter staff. They whispered about the sedan, the unfeeling owner who had simply driven off. A few tried to track down any previous records, scouring social media for lost dog posts that matched his description. Every lead came up empty or incomplete, leaving Bruno's past sealed in painful mystery. Hannah, though, refused to let hopelessness creep in. Over the next few days, she poured her energy into Bruno's recovery. She fed him carefully measured meals, monitored his weight, and made sure his minor frostbite wounds were healing. She also arranged short walks, each outing a lesson in trust. Trust that the leash meant safety, not abandonment. Trust that footsteps next to him wouldn't suddenly vanish. In those moments, Bruno began to reveal subtle glimpses of his nature. If a loud noise startled him, he'd freeze, ears back, searching for a threat. But with a gentle word from Hannah, he'd slowly relax. He also started wagging his tail, tentative at first, when she approached his kennel in the mornings. It was as if he was testing the waters of affection, uncertain but hopeful. Despite this progress, nights were harder. Bruno would pace his kennel, occasionally whining softly into the darkness. Memories still cut deep when he closed his eyes. In those hours, Hannah often found herself standing quietly by his kennel door, whispering reassurances. "I'm here," she'd say. "You're not alone." Her presence sometimes coaxed him into lying down again, muzzle resting on his paws. One evening, a man arrived at the shelter. He marched in with a sense of entitlement, claiming to have lost his German Shepherd. The staff exchanged worried looks. Could this be Bruno's owner? The man demanded to see his dog. Hannah stepped forward, brow furrowed. "We do have a shepherd," she acknowledged, "but I need proof he's yours." Visibly irritated, the man sighed, rummaging through his phone. He showed a few blurred photos of a dog that vaguely resembled Bruno. Hannah remained cautious. "He was found abandoned," she stated, voice calm but firm. "Left in the cold." "Are you saying that wasn't you?" The man's gaze flickered. He stumbled over his words, insisting it was a misunderstanding. Something in his tone felt off. The staff collectively tensed. When Hannah led him to Bruno's kennel, Bruno retreated, bristling with anxiety. He recognized that man's scent, but not with fondness. His tail drooped, ears pinned back. The man tried calling him, voice laced with forced sweetness. Bruno shuddered, pressing into the corner. The staff exchanged glances. Hannah's jaw set. "He's terrified," she said quietly. "If this dog were yours, wouldn't he be relieved to see you?" The man made excuses. He claimed Bruno was just scared from the shelter environment. Yet Bruno's reaction was clear. He wanted nothing to do with him. After a tense standoff, the man, frustrated, turned to leave. "You'll regret this," he muttered. Hannah stood her ground, crossing her arms. She wasn't about to hand Bruno over. Once he was gone, the staff exhaled collective relief. Bruno remained trembling in his kennel, heart thudding as though expecting the worst. Hannah crouched, voice steady. "He's not coming back," she promised. And though Bruno didn't understand every word, he sensed the resolve in her tone. That night, Hannah compiled the incident into the shelter's records. She detailed the man's behavior, Bruno's fearful response, and the staff's decision to protect him. Nothing was official yet, but it gave them a starting point if further threats arose. In the following days, Bruno showed a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. He clung to Hannah more, greeting her with a gentle nudge when she came by. The new sense of security allowed his personality to blossom, albeit slowly. He displayed a keen intelligence, learning short command from her: sit, stay, come. Every success replaced a fragment of fear with cautious pride. Still, Hannah couldn't shake a question. Who would adopt a dog with this much emotional baggage? People passed him by for younger, carefree puppies. She saw their sideways glances, heard polite dismissals. Yet in Bruno's steady eyes, she glimpsed unwavering loyalty. She'd keep searching for the right person, someone who'd see him as more than just a burden. Because if any dog deserved a genuine second chance, it was the shepherd who had survived betrayal in the cold. Another cold morning dawned. Bruno watched as families toured the shelter, scanning rows of kennels. He sensed the air thick with anticipation. Some dogs barked excitedly, tails wagging, hopeful to captivate new owners. Bruno, however, had learned to maintain a guarded composure. Strangers came, cooed sympathetically, then left. He stood there, quietly dignified, waiting for the day that someone might truly see him. By noon, the crowd thinned. Hannah paced near the reception desk, glancing occasionally at Bruno's kennel. She was prepared for disappointment. The last few visitors had overlooked him. Still, she refused to lose faith. She had to believe there was someone out there who could appreciate a loyal shepherd with a bruised spirit. The shelter's front door chimed. In walked Daniel Parker, a middle-aged man wearing a worn jacket and boots that hinted at years of outdoor work. He had kind eyes, though a shadow of sadness lingered behind them. Approaching the desk, he asked softly, "I heard you have a German shepherd named Bruno." Hannah's interest piqued. "We do," she replied. "Would you like to meet him?" Daniel nodded, fingers flexing with subdued nerves. Hannah led him through the corridors to Bruno's kennel. There, behind the bars, Bruno lifted his head, ears pricking curiously. Daniel crouched down, not speaking at first, just letting the dog see him. Something flickered in Daniel's expression. Recognition of loss, perhaps, or empathy beyond words. Bruno inhaled, picking up on an earthy, honest scent. He took one step closer, tail giving a tentative sway. Quietly, Daniel explained how he'd lost his longtime shepherd to cancer months before. He missed the companionship, the routine, the unwavering devotion. "I'm not sure I'm ready," he admitted, voice catching, "but I had to come see him." Hannah's heart tightened. She'd heard disclaimers before, but something in Daniel's tone resonated with sincerity. They opened the kennel, allowing Daniel inside. Bruno didn't dart away. Instead, he stood still, letting Daniel approach at his pace. Gently, Daniel extended his hand. Bruno sniffed, remembered earlier heartbreak, yet sensed no malice in this stranger. After a lingering moment, Bruno pressed his nose into Daniel's palm. The man's eyes glistened with quiet relief, as though the dog had just granted him permission to hope again. Still, uncertainty weighed on them both. Bruno had experienced abandonment more than once. Daniel had lost a companion. Could they heal each other? Over the next hour, Daniel and Bruno lingered in the training yard. Daniel tossed a softball, and Bruno's curiosity sparked. He trotted to retrieve it, then paused, checking if Daniel truly wanted it back. Each gentle command strengthened an unspoken bond. Hannah watched from a distance, a smile tugging at her lips. When it was time to talk adoption, Daniel hesitated. "I need to be sure," he said, glancing at Bruno's watchful eyes. Hannah nodded understandingly. "It's a big commitment, for both of you." Daniel crouched again, meeting Bruno's gaze. "I'm not making any promises I can't keep," he whispered. Bruno blinked, tail giving a barely perceptible wag, as if to say he understood. Daniel left, promising to return the next day. Bruno's posture slumped, confusion dancing in his eyes. But Hannah reassured him softly, "He'll come back." Night fell in the shelter, but an undercurrent of hope stirred. The following morning, the door chimed exactly when Hannah expected. Daniel walked in, an air of resolution about him. Without preamble, he asked to see Bruno again. Within minutes, Bruno was at Daniel's side, leaning into his touch. Paperwork soon followed. Hannah's heart fluttered with a mix of joy and sadness. Joy that Bruno might finally have the home he deserved, sadness at saying goodbye. With forms signed, Daniel clipped on a new collar, tinted a soft green. A final glance at Hannah conveyed gratitude words couldn't capture. When Daniel opened his truck door, Bruno hopped inside, no fear in his step. This time, the vehicle pulled away with him in it, not to abandon him, but to carry him forward into the next chapter. A second chance for a dog who once knew heartbreak. Because sometimes, trust can be rebuilt, even in a world that once felt irreparably cold. Bruno's journey from abandoned outcast to cherished companion underscores the profound resilience that lives in both dogs and humans. Left on an icy street, he had every reason to give up. His faith in people shattered the moment that car drove off without him. Yet, deep within the hush of a lonely night, hope still stirred. It found him in the form of kind-hearted rescuers who offered warmth, nourishment, and the promise that not all humans would betray him. Through the gentle patience of Hannah and the unwavering empathy of the shelter staff, Bruno discovered that compassion can mend even the deepest wounds. He learned to trust again, tentatively at first, then wholeheartedly, finding in Daniel Parker the gentle persistence that mirrored his own wounded spirit. Their bond illustrates the simple yet transformative power of mutual understanding. Each had endured a painful void, and in bridging that gap, they restored something vital in one another. What might have ended in permanent sorrow instead evolved into a story of renewal and second chances. Bruno's eyes, once dulled by despair, lit up at the prospect of a life free from betrayal. Daniel, too, felt that spark of purpose reignite in his chest, reminded of how love can heal old grief. It didn't erase the scars left behind, but it infused them with hope, turning them into marks of survival rather than reminders of failure. In the end, Bruno's tale isn't merely about a dog escaping a dire fate. It's about the human capacity for redemption and the canine capacity for forgiveness. Together, they stand as proof that broken paths can converge, forging a new road that leads toward belonging. And in that belonging, we find the essence of genuine rescue on both sides of the leash.